assalamu alaikum, sat sri akal, namaste. My name is Farheen Khan and you're watching the Azeeza Show. Today we're actually talking about using art as a form of social change, and with me is our guest, Renee McPhee.
Hey.
Welcome, Renee. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. For sure.
Yeah, so Renee, I mean, we've known each other for quite some time. It's been a while since we've seen each other, but I remember very vividly the kind of work that you had done, you were doing at that time in the writing and things like that. So maybe if you can share with us, with the audience, like tell us about yourself. Who are you?
For sure. That's such a weird question. Like, tell me about yourself. I'm a queer Black immigrant woman. What else? I have a chronic disability.
Okay.
I live with a lot of pain in my body, so that's difficult to navigate in this world.
Right.
I'm also a survivor of sexual assault, but for you to be a survivor, you have to be a victim first, so it's taken me a long time to get to that space, and art has allowed me to, embrace who I am in different ways, so yeah. Right.
And I know that, when we first met, I think we were at the women's shelter. There was that program called Exclamation, right? And, I remember you writing a bit, like writing, and sort of sharing your thoughts. So tell us, how do you find art to be a form of social change, and what kind of work have you been doing?
Art allowed me to just exist in space, especially spaces that I wouldn't normally be invited into, especially when there's like a lot of straight white men who are like middle class or upper class. I wouldn't be invited into those spaces.
Right.
But poetry and art has allowed me to go in those spaces and like own it and be really loud and say whatever I want to say,
right,
and make them feel uncomfortable sometimes, which is really cool.
Right.
Interim Place was like an interesting space in my life where I didn't know if I was going to be a poet. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was like, I just want people to hear me.
Right.
And through those different workshops, I started writing. I started running workshops again, which I had been doing in England.
Right, and you're from England.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you come to Canada?
2008.
Okay,
2008, cool. And I hated it.
Really?
I did not want to be here. But when I started doing workshops and being more active in the community and like finding other like newcomers and immigrants and refugees, I felt that there was more of a community that was there for me to be a part of, instead of feeling like on the outside.
Right.
This sense of like not belonging was something that like I've held on to for a long time, even in England.
Right.
When workshops and art have really allowed me to come out of my shell and create a new shell in different ways.
Right.
So yeah.
And you're working on a play? Can you tell us about this exciting play? I'm excited.
I am working on a play. It's about my different levels of survival. It's weird to like talk about it because it's still very in the beginning stage.
Right.
It's going to be a marriage to myself,
okay,
where you just see the growth of me just learning how to love me for me, like without other things, without the shame, the blame, the guilt, all these different things that people push onto me and my body, and sometimes what I do to myself as well. So yeah, it's a moment of self-love.
Right.
And I'm super excited about that. It's going to be a fusion of poetry, which you've known me to do, and like a new style of writing as well, and different levels of comedy, because I want to get into comedy as well.
Right.
And I don't know if there's any politically correct way of using humor when you're talking about sexual assault, but I'm going to try it.
Right.
And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I can do something else. And that's what life has taught me, that you just try and try and try until it works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things, right? It's like, art is a way to kind of engage people, to have those, like to talk about those sensitive issues that, people might not normally talk about.
For sure.
So whether it's comedy or whether it's art, plays, like theatrical plays, or if it's film or whatever, and your poetry and writing. I mean, those are all sort of ways, right, in which people can kind of express themselves. And I think, I know when I wrote my books, like, that was the whole thing. It was like, what it is it's something so personal, but at the same time, it's like, I remember afterwards, people being able to reach out to me and say, oh my God, I feel like you were, speaking the words in my heart,
Definitely.
right?
Yeah.
And, I couldn't put it into words, but now you have for me, thank you so much, this type of thing, right? So do you find find that with like, I know you used to perform a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like, how did you find that experience?
Amazing. Like, I don't know, there's no real, I don't think there's one word that describes it.
Right.
I knew that poetry was for me. After the first time I performed, I knew my first performance,
Right.
which was 6 years ago. Wow.
6 years ago. Huh?
Yeah, 6 years ago. I remember like holding a piece of paper, my hands were shaking,
Right.
and I felt like I needed to pee.
It was so nervous.
And I was like, oh, I can't do it. And I don't know, that feeling afterwards, I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is it. Like,
Right.
nothing else. And it's so strange that like the first time I was like shaking and stuff, and
Right.
after that you just get into it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It was the best. It really allowed me to meet new people, and people value my words, and I
Right.
got paid for my art. I don't know how many artists get paid for their art.
Yeah, it's always an issue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, people don't.
Instead of just hearing, oh, it's for exposure.
Right.
So poetry led me to artist development. I've even been able to write a curriculum for artists
Oh,
as
really?
well. Yeah, like
Cool.
I was working for a company last year, and yeah, that's what I was working on, which was, I had no idea that was what it's going to lead to, but
Right.
that was really cool.
And what kind of issues do you talk about, just for the audience to know?
Oh yeah, true. What do I talk about? More recently, it's been more my childhood abuse that I went through. Because I feel like if anyone who's like really like seeing the journey of who I am,
Right.
most of my pieces, when they do talk about the abuse that I went through, it's been when I was like 16. Like 16 and teens is when I talk about.
Right.
Something new to me to talk about is like childhood, when I was like 4 or 5.
Right.
And I'm still working through it.
I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
But I think it's necessary for me to work through it. I think that's why the play came up. I'm pretty sure I was like in bed one day and I was like, oh, I need to write a play. What?
Yeah.
I don't want to write a play.
It's okay. I do the same thing. On 2 a.m. like
I know.
ideas, right?
Like, shouldn't I be sleeping? No. Yeah, and it was just this journey of, I don't know, it's been interesting. Life has been interesting. You just kind of ride the waves. You ride the waves and you write about whatever feels right in the moment. As soon as I felt like I was writing for other people, then I stopped.
Right.
That was it. I stopped when I felt like I had to make all my pieces sound positive, or I had to make all my pieces sound like positive affirmations. I was
Right.
like, this isn't coming from a genuine place for me,
Yes.
especially if I'm depressed.
Yes.
Or I'm anxious, or I didn't like myself this morning. Yeah, and I think that's why I started trying to create spaces where I could do my own performances instead of people just paying me to perform at their events, because then they're looking for a certain
A
sound.
specific message,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. I hear
And
you.
I didn't like that. But to some
Well,
extent,
that's
I was
good.
like, whatever, like gets my bills paid. But then I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Right, because it's actually, I mean, ultimately it's about being authentic to yourself, right? And
definitely.
your voice. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. It's been a journey. It's been a journey. Yeah. Definitely depression. I talk about depression a lot. That's one thing that I feel like a lot of, I can't speak for everyone,
Right.
but definitely in my family, and my family are Black, and we don't talk about mental health enough.
Yeah. For sure. It's I think the same in a lot of communities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
We don't talk about it. We definitely don't talk about how it can affect us in different ways. Sometimes
See, it seemed like a sign of weakness, right? Or
Yeah.
that you're not able to function
Like you're just
properly, or you're
lazy.
just,
You're just
yes,
lazy.
you're lazy. That's
like,
right.
it's not laziness. I can't get out of bed. Like,
Yeah.
So trying to bring light on those kind of different like topics that
Right.
my parents may not wanted to talk to me when I was younger, but now we can talk about those things.
Right.
I never would have thought I could talk to my mom about depression, and now we can. Like, my mom's like this to me.
That's good.
So yeah, we're in a better space now. I think poetry's allowed that.
Yeah.
It's given me a lot of confidence,
Right.
where, I don't know, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't write poetry. Oh, I'm not a writer. Oh, I can't do those things. But if you don't try it, you don't know.
Right.
And that's part of what art has done for me, to allow spaces to be created, whether it's through workshops or Like, I don't know. It's just, art's amazing. I love it. I love being an artist.
Yeah. So I want to ask you something else. So in terms of like, just to kind of build up on this piece. So art for you as an individual, this is really important because I know that like for me as well, like when I wrote my books, it was very cathartic for me. I was like, wow, like, you know, I put my experiences post 9/11 being attacked and all of those things, like the struggles of my life on paper, right? And I was able to kind of share that, and I felt this form of healing when as I wrote it and kind of shared it out there publicly. And then I think part of my personal journey, and you tell me if this, you know, what your thoughts are on this, is like, was all about, you know, trying to actually shift the way in which people saw me as a person, but also saw my community, right? And so like, I was really trying to kind of educate as I went along to be like, okay, you know, if people in the world are Islamophobic and they're trying to, you know, pigeonhole us into being a certain way based on what they see on their TV screens, how can my book be, you know, something that sort of challenges that, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Why did I write? Writing was my escape.
Okay.
So I don't think I was necessarily trying to challenge anything other than myself. It was a very personal thing.
Right.
And if people identified with it, they did. If they didn't, oh well.
Right.
And then when people would come up to me afterwards and be like, oh my gosh, I identify as that, or I can relate to that.
Right.
I wish I had said that to my boyfriend or my girlfriend or whatever.
Right.
I think that's what poetry was for me. It started off as an escape, for sure. It was definitely this escape, and then I realized by me escaping, I was challenging different things.
Right.
By me existing, brought light to certain things, like being Black, being queer, being like all these different these different identities that like are socially constructed anyways. But all these things that were pushed upon me that I embraced because I thought, you know what, this is what I need, came out in my writing.
Right.
So I felt like, yeah, my writing challenged things, but that wasn't the aim. The aim wasn't to bring light to being Black and queer, even though some of my pieces seem like that.
Right.
Like I was trying to find a piece to share today, and then I couldn't find one. I was like, oh my gosh, like, how come I don't have one? But then the title of one came up, and it was the Power of P. And it's about breaking down the walls of patriarchy and being a strong woman, whatever woman means to you. Right. But just the letter P is throughout the whole thing. Like it's like fantastic. Like not even it's just one of my best pieces that like really feel like it's challenging something. Right. Yeah, my aim wasn't to challenge anyone. It was just to exist like peacefully. And as I was doing that, I felt like a lot of people were drawn to that because I just seemed very rebellious without trying. It was a very natural rebellion. Right. Instead of, I'm going to flip a table. I'm really mad and angry at the world. I'm not angry at a lot of people. I think I've become angry sometimes, but for the most part, I'm not, how can I put this in a way that the people who have hurt me, or their words that have hurt, I don't really hate them. It's kind of like, this is your life and this is what you've chosen to do. Okay, cool. I've made my own decisions. I'm not perfect. Fine. Do you? Freedom of speech. Who cares?
Right. Well, why don't we take a quick break? Yeah. And then we'll be back. So we'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back. We're talking today on the Azeeza show about art and using art as a tool for social change. And with me is Renee McPhee. So Renee, tell us. So, you know, one of the things that we were talking about before, you know, during the break was like, how does art? We talked about art being, a vehicle for social change. But you know, in recent days, we've seen a lot of violence break out in the city of Toronto, and I'm just wondering, like, what are your thoughts on how, perhaps, art can be used as a form of engaging some of these youth?
Yeah. Gun violence is something that like affects me directly because it's been something that's like been in my family. And art would help, I believe, if there were spaces for people to express their feelings and emotions, get it out, like write it down, put it on a canvas, dance, like different, if there was like funding for these things,
Right.
and like funding's being cut left, right, and center.
Right
So,
now, yeah.
yeah, trying to find spaces where you can be yourself and get that extra energy out, and that potential aggression or that sense of community. That's one thing that I didn't feel like I had growing up, was a sense of community. So when I did have like chosen family, it allowed me to feel more connected to the outside world, even though it's like, you're not this and you're not that. It was like, no worries, I have my 5 friends here that I meet up with every week.
Right.
It creates structure when you have like a community or like a youth group to go to. It creates a sense of, I belong here and it's okay. Even if life is really horrible, even at home, if you have that mini break at school or a community center, if you're allowed to go into those spaces, because like some people don't have the freedom to do that when outside of school, right?
Right.
But yeah, like, I think that art in different ways, like the spoken word, like I feel like there's a difference between poetry and spoken word. Spoken word is more connected to the roots of hip hop.
Right.
And I feel that that would connect a lot of people as well. And there's organizations like Unity, there's organizations like Rise that are in Scarborough, you know, and some people wouldn't know about that. And they're like free events. They run free event. Like Manifesto is an event coming up.
Right.
And it's like they have events throughout the year, but then there's like the big events that they do, and they're free. Like most of their events are, and it's so awesome because it's really great to see like people of color just come together and really just love one another and not feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be hurt here. I can't be safe. Yeah, art brings us together, or it can do, if we allow it to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And what if I can ask you, I mean, you've talked about the fact that, you know, like gun violence in particular is something very close to your family. So would you be willing to share with us like how that is connected to you and like how you found your voice, or like how did you find art?
Gun violence. I have family members who've gone to jail, who've been locked up because of their association with certain folks. And if they had a space where they could have spoken about their feelings and emotions, they wouldn't have potentially gone down the route that they picked. Because I feel like this is my opinion and only my opinion, but I feel like they could have had a choice, and they made their choice because they found a sense of community in a gang.
And we hear this a lot,
Yeah.
right? In terms of feeling
gangs
a sense of belonging.
Yeah, gangs are families, no matter how much like there's negativity and it's really toxic, especially like for men. There's a lot of toxic masculinity that stops you from being who you really are.
Yes.
I just feel like if there was like more mentorship and more like a sense of, especially in like male communities, like if there was a sense of like brotherhood, we could do better. Like we could do better as a people, individually, collectively, as a society. We could do better instead of, oh no, it's just those groups over there, it's just those groups over there, they can do better, or let's just leave them to kill themselves off. Because I've heard like a lot of different opinions, even from family members. When some of my family were locked up, I heard a lot of negativity. Well, they deserve it. No one deserves it.
No, exactly.
Like most people that do get locked up, they made a wrong decision, and the system isn't there to protect people of color. So, yeah.
Yeah, we see that, right? There's a higher number of racialized people in jails.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And what do you do afterwards? After you have a criminal record, what do? You're forced to like work in places that there's no growth for you. And if there's no growth, then you're just gonna go back to the ways that you made money before. So it's just this real cycle of just like the system isn't there to protect anyone other than the ones at the top already, the ones that have created the system.
And how did you find, like, given that you grew up in that environment, how did you find, like, what inspired you to start writing?
What inspired me? I had no one to talk to. No matter, like, I had no one to talk to. I didn't really have too many friends I could tell the truth, that, you know, I couldn't tell them that I had family members that were sexually assaulting me. I couldn't tell them that I felt so alone, and what does loneliness look like when you have so many friends around you.
Right.
When you had, like, I was very angry for a very long time. I was just very, very, very angry, and writing and poetry and words, that was my escape. That was the way I got through. I was like, I'm just gonna write it out. And I remember having a red pen, because that's rebellious. And just like writing it out, just like, life. And then I would feel better afterwards.
Right.
Then I could breathe and continue for another 5 minutes until I had to write again.
Yeah.
It was just like these outbursts. I had to write them down. If I didn't, then I would explode, or
Right.
I would cry, or sometimes I would cry as I was writing, and that was okay as well.
Right. Totally.
But yeah, I got pushed into poetry to stay alive. It's been my way of survival for a long time, and then it was a way that I made a lot of money as well. But yeah, it's how I found love and passion, and how I found myself. And I never would have thought, I never would have thought that poetry would do that for me. Never. I can't even put it into words. It's like, it's the best feeling to wake up in the morning saying, oh, I'm just gonna do what I love. What?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So it's really great. Poetry has been really great and wonderful, and it's allowed me to meet certain people and still create new connections and maintain older connections, and be like, yeah, I've done that, and I'm still there. It's my foundation. Poetry is my foundation, and from there I've been able to go into fashion, and from there,
fashion. That's pretty cool. This is new.
Fashion. That's pretty cool. So me and my best friend, we sell clothing. We sell upcycled clothing.
Okay.
It's upcycled from vintage pieces for the most part.
Okay.
And we collaborate with artists in the community, and it's just really cool stuff. Like, I don't know, like, I don't want to like boost myself up too much.
Please.
But
where do we find out more about this?
Yeah, so we're called The Original Smiths.
Okay.
So we're online. We have a website, theoriginalsmiths.com.
Okay. Cool.
You can find us on Instagram as well.
Nice.
OG Smiths.
Okay.
We're also on Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah, we're like kind of all around Facebook. I'm pretty sure it's OG Smith, so I'm not in charge of the Facebook. Like, it looks a little sleepy. But definitely the Instagram, OG Smiths.
OG Smiths,
And we do custom made pieces as well.
Right.
We're always trying to collaborate with different people, especially people of color.
Very cool.
And it's amazing that I get to, one, work with my best friend, who's amazing. And she makes really cool pieces, and I get to like talk to really cool artists and sell my stuff. Like,
very cool.
Yeah, it was really, really, really cool, especially because fashion is so dominated by older white people, and that's fine. But I'm not old and I'm not white, so here I come again, challenging things without trying.
That's great.
Yeah, we were recently in Fashion Art Toronto.
Were you? Cool.
Yeah, and we were the night that we decided to show our pieces, we were the only black women showing.
Really?
And we were the only black women that like walked the whole way. Like, no one really walks the runway. Everyone just is this really casual.
Right.
At the end, and we're like, no, we're walking because we're models. And like, we're
cool.
queens here. It was amazing. Yeah, so we're just doing different things. We run workshops as well about women's empowerment.
Right.
We received a lot of funding for that. So we have a lot of different things coming up.
Very cool.
That. OG Smiths, we're cool. This necklace is OG Smiths.
Is it? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Very nice.
All about like natural stuff, natural upcycling, and like just being connected to the universe in whatever way you can.
Yeah.
And trying to stay grounded, because there's rocky times coming. So.
Yeah. And I mean, some of that's already happening, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're seeing a lot of this stuff politically, right, in the world right now.
It's been happening for a long time. I feel like a lot of artists and those connected to anything will know that this is not new information.
No, for sure.
People of color being used and killed and murdered, like, isn't new.
No.
And our voices not being heard, that's not new. Going back to older times that didn't work, but people think it works.
Right, exactly.
Not new.
Not new. But it still hurts, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
It still hurts. It still, impacts us, and it's still a struggle. It's just like, and sometimes it can be exhausting.
Oh,
right?
Beyond drained, beyond draining. Like I try to avoid watching the news for the most part. There was recently a murder that happened, maybe 5 minutes walk from my apartment.
Really?
That happened like sometime this week. Yeah. So it was one of those things that it doesn't get to like mainstream news all the time, but it's still very much happening. And I don't know, they pick and choose. The media gets to pick and choose what you hear for the day.
Yeah, for sure. I hear you. It's like, yeah, I know. That's it. It's nice to have some allies in the media, and obviously, we're doing our best to try to bring out some positive stories too.
Definitely, you're doing a good job.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Like we all appreciate. We need it. It's nice to be invited into a space that wants me to be me. You know, instead of oh my gosh. What did she do? She's black and has opinions. Just like, it's just those spaces where I'm not allowed to exist. And you've allowed people to be themselves. And like, I'm thankful for that. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for, we're almost out of time. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being all of who you are. Thank you for, doing all the things that you do and being that trailblazer. Like, we need more people like you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching this week. There you have it. We're talking about, take a look and see what you can do, how you can use art. And sometimes, I know through even through our Facebook page, a lot of people are starting to reach out about some of the challenges you're dealing with. Continue to contact us and, reach out and perhaps, write down some of your feelings. It'll certainly help, and we continue the journey together. Take care.